Hey, how's it going, everybody? Mike Weber here. Let's talk about real estate, and more specifically, let's talk about inflation and whether or not you should buy a home now before your purchasing power continues to erode away. So we are in a pretty crazy environment right now. We're seeing prices rise, even the official numbers in the CPI rising faster than anything we've seen going back to the 1970s, and unofficially, inflation is a wildfire that is absolutely out of control. Now, I have a lot of people asking me, should they buy a home now? Should they wait? And I also sense and hear a lot of fear out there from buyers who are unsure of whether or not now is the right time, or if they're even going to be able to buy a home at all, or whatever the case may be. So I'd like to take a few minutes and try to shed some light on this question and maybe help some of you out there that aren't sure, that are maybe currently renting a home, that might want to buy a home in the future. Now, one thing I've been saying to buyers for years, and I think it's more pertinent now than ever, is that you're already paying somebody's mortgage, just not your own. And what I mean by that, of course, is if you're renting a place, you're paying off the mortgage of the landlord, but as the renter, you're not paying your own mortgage. So either way, you're paying a mortgage, and so it might as well be your own. And so something to think about: as you stay in a property and rent rises over time, you're helping to pay off the landlord's mortgage and help them build wealth, while of course you're not helping yourself be any closer to financial security in the future. So I want to get started, and first off, just take a look at what inflation actually is. Definition: run a simple Google search, and we have inflation is a persistent increase in the level of consumer prices or a persistent decline in the purchasing power of money. So that is exactly what we are experiencing right now. And to illustrate that point, let's take a look at what has happened to money supply in just the last 1 to 2 years. So here we're looking at a chart from Trading Economics, and I'll post these links in the description down below, that's showing what is happening to money supply. And what you see here is in just the last couple of years, we have seen a dramatic spike upwards. Totally unprecedented spike upwards in the amount of money that is being produced by the Federal Reserve that's out there floating around in the economy. And of course, this is why we're seeing not just home prices, but all prices across the economy rise very quickly. Now, the official measure for inflation that people like to cite a lot, being the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, shows we're at a year-over-year rise in prices of about 6.5% right now. But a lot of non-official estimates put it much closer to maybe 10, 12, 15% when you really factor in the reality of all the different prices that the average consumer has to pay are going up over time. And what we've continued to see over time is that real estate and rents have risen dramatically while incomes have been relatively stable. Now let's take a look at what each of those look like on a graph. All right, so here we can see the National Home Price Index from Case-Shiller on Fred. And again, I'll have these links down below. And what you can see here, if you look at the index going back to 1988, we started at 60 on the index. Now we're at 260. So very quickly, you can do the math. Obviously, there's been a huge acceleration in prices, and really over the last couple of years, it's been extremely dramatic. Now, the reason why is because that is coinciding with the massive growth in the money supply, and there's more money chasing limited supply of houses that are on the market at any given time. So now let's take a look at what wages have done in comparison to home prices. Now, if we look at the data here on Fred, we see that in the mid 80s, which is where the other chart was, we were on the index here somewhere around 330 or so. And now you speed up all the way to today and we're at 368. So compared to home prices, obviously wages have not risen that significantly. Now, of course, this is adjusted for the CPI, but irregardless, when I've seen non-adjusted data, it does show that wages have not kept up with general inflation and prices in the economy across the board. And so this brings us to the crux of this discussion, whether or not somebody should buy a home, especially now because of the type of inflation we're seeing, or wait for maybe a potential crash or something like that. Now, my thinking is if you are going to stay in an area, for instance, if you're here in LA like I am, and you plan to stay in Los Angeles for the long term, I'm not sure that the risk of hoping that maybe prices were to come down substantially is worth not taking action and having a place locked in. Now, really everything is up to whether or not the Federal Reserve and the federal government are going to start being more responsible in terms of the spending that they're doing and the money that they're printing. And I don't think that's something that we can expect to happen anytime soon. In fact, what we're seeing is that even in the face of this extreme inflation that we haven't experienced since the 1970s, the Federal Reserve and the government is pretending that it's transitory and trying to come up with excuses and storylines and narratives of how inflation is somehow good for us. And of course, as I'm sure you know, that's a load of baloney. Now, one last thing I do want to take a look at is let's look at rents. Now, when we look at rents, this is a great infographic that I found here on apartmentguide.com, and check this out. This shows us what's happened with rents, let's see, for 2021. So it'll show us if we hover over any given state, what the percent change is. Red, all the way to the far end of the spectrum, the highest increase year over year is 44% year over year. And on the low side, it's negative 20. But as you can see, most of the entire chart is on the positive end of the spectrum. Now, if we just pick a few out, we have California, year over year rent increase 23.15%. That is a massive rent increase in just a single year. Clearly, it is much above what the average person income is going up in that same year. And if these are going on year after year after year, obviously it's going to get much more difficult to be able to afford rent if it keeps rising at such a rapid pace. Whereas if somebody buys a property, at least they know for the next 30 years or however long they choose to finance the property, that their mortgage payment is going to remain exactly the same. Now, just food for thought, we'll look here. We got Florida. So you have a 39.27% increase in Florida. Texas, 9.7. Let's see, Oregon, you have 32%. So vast price increases happening across the country. Now, we're also seeing the same in real estate. Many markets across the country are up 20%. Many are up 15% in median prices. So the cost of living, the cost of having a home to stay in, whether you purchase it or you rent it is rising dramatically. And I think this is something that's very important because based on what I see, I don't think the Federal Reserve or the US government is going to shift course anytime soon. In fact, the new narrative is that somehow more spending is going to reduce inflation, which obviously is absurd. The very cause for the inflation we're having is reckless spending, increases in the money supply to fund all of the reckless spending. And so I think it's very unlikely that we see anything change soon. Now, that being said, is there the potential that they reverse course all of a sudden, that a new administration comes in, or, we have such high inflation that they finally just say, you know what, we got to do something about it like they did in the 1970s? Yes, I do think that's possible. And if that happens, will real estate prices come down? I think they definitely would come down. But again, is it worth the risk? What if that never happens? What if we just have hyperinflation and then you're priced out of the housing market forever, or it becomes exceedingly difficult to purchase anything in the future? So I think these are some of the questions that we need to think about, that people need to think about, that they need to ask themselves. I think if you're staying in a community, you want to live there for the foreseeable future, and it's your primary residence, my thinking is definitely purchase. Do not rent. Rent keeps going up. It's rising at an out of control pace. At least if you buy something, you have your foot in the door. Now, if you're planning to move out of state or to a different area, less expensive area, that's a different story, obviously. May make sense to move somewhere where you have more buying power, you can get something that you like a bit more. Now, if you're thinking about buying a home anywhere in the US, definitely reach out to me, let me know. Being part of Keller Williams, we have access to a network of top producing agents all across the country, so I can get you set up with somebody in the community that you're looking to purchase that is an expert that sells a lot of real estate, which will essentially be like a shortcut to the front of the line for you. And if you're looking to purchase something here in the Los Angeles area, definitely give me a shout. I'm here to help and answer any questions that you have. Well, appreciate you guys watching. Let me know what you think about inflation and whether or not it's a good time to buy real estate down in the comments below. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next one.